Mainstream media supremacy and Democratic rhetoric fuels the divide and hatred in America. Despite a warning from Beto O'Rourke to stay out of Texas, despite the threat of protesters, President Trump today visited Dayton, Ohio, and El Paso, Texas, to pay his respect to the families of victims and to congratulate the excellent work of law enforcement and first responders.
And we'll be meeting with first responders, law enforcement, some of the victims, and paying my respects and regards. I'll be going with the First Lady, and it's a terrific opportunity really to congratulate some of the police and law enforcement. The job they've done was incredible, really incredible. So my critics are political people. They're trying to make points. In many cases, they're running for president and they're very low in the polls. A couple of them in particular, very low in the polls. If you look at Dayton, that was the person that supported, I guess you would say, Bernie Sanders, I understood. Antifa, I understood. Elizabeth Warren, I understood. Had nothing to do with President Trump. So these are people that are looking for political gain. I don't think they're getting it. And as much as possible, I've tried to stay out of that. Well, I do agree, but I think we have toned it down. We've been getting hit left and right from everybody. Many of the people I don't know, a couple of people from Texas, political people from Texas that aren't doing very well. I guess somebody said the mayor, I had one very nice conversation with the mayor of Dayton, could not have been nicer. And then she goes and says, I tried to call her. Well, I spoke to her, and I didn't receive any calls. So they're trying to make political points. I don't think it works because, you know, I would like to stay out of the political fray. As I was saying, and as just came out, the Dayton situation, he was a fan of Antifa. He was a fan of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Nothing to do with Trump, but nobody ever mentions that.
Today, the President and Mrs. Trump went for themselves to El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio, to see firsthand exactly what these communities are going through and why we as a nation grieve this process and are brought together. And the Democrats who claim that this president should be drawing people together. This president should be not dividing the nation, but rather uniting the nation. Yet, what was he told by Beto O'Rourke? Don't you dare go to Texas. We got a whack-out governor in California who not only has, quote, forbidden Trump to visit his state, but has even now enacted legislation to remove his name from the voting ballot in California. You people that live in California, how do you like living in a fascist dictatorship where now you're told not only what to think, but you're now told who you can and can't vote for? Wow. And they claim that it's the people on the right, it's the conservatives, it's the Donald Trump who's the dictator, it's the Donald Trump who's part of the thought police and a racist and a thisophobe and a thatophobe and limiting your freedom of expression. And yet, it's the libloons, the out-of-their-mind progressive leftists in this country who are absolutely ushering in fascism, the erosion of our rights and our freedoms, all because they don't like the Orange Man. So incessantly, since these shootings over the weekend, the mainstream media and their guests, their panelists, and Democratic politicians, in particular those running for office, have talked about this president, his hatred, supposedly, his bigotry, fueling white supremacy. And I'm not going to recover all this ground. I've done it in previous monologues and videos, and I really don't want to keep covering the same ground repeatedly. But this whole false narrative of this out-of-control white supremacy in this country is a bunch of bullhock. Where there is supremacy is leftist liberal ideology within media. Whether it's CNN, PMSNBC, even some of the anchors and commentators over at Faux Pas News, formerly known as Fox News, ABC, NBC, CBS, that mainstream lying legacy corporate corrupt media, which is really nothing more than a propaganda machine. They don't report facts. They report an agenda, a narrative that they want you to listen to and follow. And apparently some people do. That's why there were protesters that showed up today in Ohio, in Texas. That, and I'm sure we'll find out later on that George Soros funded a lot of this. But this continual beating of the drum and beating of the president, and now you have Barack Obama out there chiming in and Hillary Rodham Clinton chiming in. Yet when the president defends himself, so-called alleged Republicans, like former failed governor of Ohio, John Kasich, he was also a failed presidential candidate, goes on CNN and says, this president needs to stop tweeting and shut up and just what? Let Barack Obama, let Joe Biden, let the Democrats rail on him, call him comparisons to Hitler, which Beto O'Rourke did, and that his rhetoric was exactly what the Nazis used to gin up anti-Semitic and hatred for Jews. What, Trump is just supposed to take all that and not respond? Because he can't get the likes of you or Witness Protection Romney to respond. You guys don't ever come out and defend the president or his record. Then again, you never really defended George W. Bush or Ronald Reagan. These guys were constantly taking a beating from the media, a verbal beating from Democrats like Ted Kennedy and the rest of that ilk of that era. And now you have the ilk of Nancy Botox Pelosi, Chuck E. Cheese Schumer, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and her hit squad of 4. It's unbelievable. And the president fights back. He will not allow them to paint the narrative. Barack Obama shouldn't be talking at all. 24 mass shootings while he was in office. What'd he do about it? Yeah, nothing. His so-called hometown of Chicago. Every weekend they set new records in gun violence and death. Yet it's black on black crime there, so Barack doesn't talk about it. Oh, and Bernie Sanders will keep us insisting we just need more gun control. More gun control. And Joe Biden said yesterday if he is elected, he will confiscate all assault weaponry. Really? Chicago has the strictest gun laws in the nation, yet it's the deadliest city on the planet. So while the Democrats are out there using this as a fundraiser, using this as a way to not only raise money, but continue to vilify this president and accuse him of hatred, accuse him of bigotry, accuse him of creating the divide, their needless rhetoric spawns and fosters. The guy in Ohio was not a Trump supporter on any level. Seeing what happened in Texas and buying into the false narrative of what happened in Texas, he took it upon himself to go out and do a little killing of his own of some so-called right-wingers in Ohio. Because he's a Bernie/Elizabeth Warren supporter. But I said over the weekend when I cut my first video and monologue for this, I really didn't want to because we had such little information on the shooter in Texas. What we had was the spoon-fed narrative. Finally, his manifesto has been posted where we now can read it. And Shazam, Batman, it isn't anything like the media, including conservative media outlets like Fox News, were reporting all weekend long, and even certain GOP lawmakers were jumping on the bandwagon of saying Trump's got to tone it down, and we do need more gun legislation, and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. We find out that the Texas shooter had leftist leanings. Oh, yes, he did. In his manifesto, he makes it abundantly clear, yeah, he doesn't like Latinos. Why does he like Latinos? Because they're poisoning the planet. He's a Green Deal guy. He's an environmentalist whack job. He believes that the only way we're going to save the planet is to thin the herd out of human beings. And so we start with the least desirable human beings, those who are poisoning and corrupting the planet. And nobody poisons this planet like third world Latino nations do. Shazam. Boom. There it is. There it is. But yet, media supremacy, continually pushing the false narrative. It was Trump. It was his rhetoric. We got to do away with Trump rallies because that just ignites this white supremacist racism. You have presidential candidates like Mayor Pete Buttigieg out there talking about we have a white supremacy problem that's leading to white supremacist terrorism. And the media is pushing this, and most Republicans are not pushing back. And now we find out that the shooter in Texas is a leftist. I told you over the weekend, I didn't want to say a lot about this because we didn't have all the information. Now, it's great that the manifesto was out there and we can finally read it, but the news cycle has done such a psyche and effect on the conscience of the average American who doesn't really get into the minutia of how all of this works. So protesters show up when the President of the United States, during a time of great national tragedy, wants to go and be a healer, a peacemaker. He wants to comfort grieving families. He wants to hear their concerns. And he wants to congratulate people who put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But the Democrats, the lying legacy corporate corrupt mainstream media, make the environment so toxic, and yet while they vilify this president for creating the rhetoric which divides the nation, they divide the nation. These are vile, reprehensible individuals across the board. And it's shameful. It's outright shameful. And that a so-called presidential candidate would actually tell the president in a time of crisis, stay home. Stay home. This guy's running for president? This Mr. Skateboarder, we got to watch him at the dentist's office, then getting a haircut, and he thinks, that by going, Facebook Live with that, it makes him hip and cool, and we should elect him as president. Why, he'll just do some FaceTiming with Kim Jong-un at the dentist's office, and that's how they, nuclear weapons, we'll give you money. Just stop testing nuclear weapons, okay? Do you understand the level of stupidity? And I'm going to say a politically incorrect word right now. Retardation, that is. And yet, the lying legacy, media supremacy, spouts that as if, wow, Beto and Mayor Pete, these guys are really tapped into the culture. They know how to communicate. Beto standing there over anything and everything is always crying and apologizing for being white and a fake Latino. So that's how he's going to negotiate with world leaders in China who manipulated currency and tried to send us into an economic tailspin, and Trump fought back and is winning. What would Beto do? While he's getting his hair cut, do a live video chat with the supreme leader of China who is forever president, Mr. Xi, and say, you can have whatever you want, just like leave our economy alone so people can, pay for their internet and buy stuff on Amazon, okay? That's what we want to elect to lead us, to represent us? Are you kidding me? And then these people have the audacity to say that it is the Trump rhetoric which spawns this evil. These people are evil incarnate. And these individuals that pull the trigger, they are either pawns, setups, or just dupes themselves of a satanic system. Sebastian Gorka, one-time advisor to President Trump, took to the radio airwaves to share with us the manifesto of the Texas shooter.
The facts of the case are that both of these shooters are individuals with proclivities that lean towards the left. The second one, the one in Dayton, actually spoke glowingly of Senator Elizabeth Warren, has commended the left-wing Antifa movement. The first attacker in El Paso published a manifesto, and that manifesto is chilling in several ways. Number one, the person who wrote this, the murderer, the killer, is not stupid. They are relatively well read. They are evil, but they are not dumb. And he says at the end of his 4-page manifesto the following, and it really is quite stunning a prediction. My ideology has not changed for several years. My opinions on automation, immigration, and the rest predate Trump and his campaign for president. I'm putting this here because some people will blame the president or certain presidential candidates for the attack. This is not the case. I know that the media will probably call me a white supremacist anyway and blame Trump's rhetoric. The media is infamous for fake news. Their reaction to this attack will likely just confirm that. Well, it has. Their behavior has confirmed that. If you read the rest of the manifesto, it is available online. This is a man who, much like Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, was a Luddite. He hated Hispanic immigration, yes, but he hated automation more. He said that I will not get my dream job because of technology and automation. This is a man who is against free markets and corporations. He repeatedly attacks corporations and corporate America. And fascinatingly, he is also an environmentalist. He calls the massive polluters the enemy. He calls the haters of our collective values the enemy. Who thinks in terms of collective values? Yes, the left. Who is obsessed with the environment, who has turned environmentalism into a quasi-religion? Yes, the left.
There it is. These new antisocial, social media only, hybrid mishmash of political views and ideology that tip their hand of where they stand on issues, and no one pays any attention until after the shots ring out, and then what we want to do is enact gun legislation or somehow figure out ways under carefully worded laws about mental illness and mental well-being that we can't let individuals like that have firearms. At what point does anybody who's a traditional, heterosexual, conservative, white individual, they're not mentally stable, they can't have firearms? And make no mistake, Joe Biden isn't just interested in confiscating assault weaponry. He wants to confiscate all weapons. That's where this is headed. That's the narrative. And the shootings and the blaming of the president, the media is responsible. These Democratic presidential wannabes, they're responsible. They ginned up and created individuals coming and protesting the president during a time of national distress and crisis. Shame on them. But sadly, they don't care. Hey, thanks for watching the Afternoon Drive here on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Tell some other people about what we do here. Share these links. Paste them up anywhere and everywhere that you can. Get the word out. Help us grow this channel. Make sure you're a subscriber if you haven't done so already. Smack the bell so that you get my next rant, and give us a big thumbs up.